Got it.
So first things first, thanks for your time. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk to you and to be able to interview you. I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion. So
yeah, it'll be fun, I'm sure.
So how are you? How's the weather in
Oh, it's magical. Another perfect day in California.
Yeah, that I believe.
The best part of being here is the weather. It's always good weather. You know?
Yeah, that I believe.
Yeah.
Talking about the nice weather, which is kind of artistic, I want to ask, how did you how did you become an artist? Was it something you always wanted to do? Was it something that was always there, which you thought about it as well when you were a pilot? Or how did you come to switch lane to keep a motorsport wording?
Well, I mean, I was always interested in art from quite young age. My grandfather was a painter, so I kind of grew up standing next to him, watching him paint when I was 4 or 5 years old, and then, but I never really did anything myself, you know, for all the time that when I grew up. When I started making some money racing, I bought the odd piece of art here and there, you know, on my travels and so on. I started collecting a little bit, you know, on a smaller scale. But it was really when I was in Formula One, 1986, in fact, my driver colleague, Elio De Angelis, Italian driver, who very sadly got killed in a testing accident. And we were very, very close friends, and it kind of affected me quite badly. And I don't really know why to this day, but something prompted me to go and buy a canvas, some paint, and try to create something in his memory. And that's really what got me started, you know. And then I realized immediately that this is something I really love doing. And it was kind of therapeutic as well as just, you know, something that really, you know, I really love doing it, you know, from the first moment I started. So, and I've been doing it on and off since then. You know, it's been a hobby my whole life since then, until, you know, about 6 years ago when I started to take it more serious and actually pursue it as a sort of a career, more or less, you know. So I have a great studio, as you can see in the background. I mean, I got a great space I work in here in Santa Monica, California, and that's my new life now.
If I have the opportunity to come to California, Santa Monica, I'll drop by to
of
get
course.
of all the,
you have to.
I just wanted, just following on the art, could you explain a bit more what you want to show, what you want to represent, or what inspire you, what is influencing you, and is there any relation to Formula One in what you draw? Is there like an influence or whatever?
Yeah, there is. I mean, so I have 3 different styles really that I do. So I have very, very detailed figurative portraits mainly. I also did some hands earlier on, but very large scale, sort of out of proportion. I think you can see a little bit in the background, one portrait there, which is of Marlon Brando. But the portraits have a quote attached to it. So the text kind of obscures the image a little bit, and the text is sort of what brings meaning to the painting. So it's a, you know, quote where I make you thoughtful, laugh, get angry, or whatever reaction the viewer may have, that's kind of the purpose of the art, you know, and of that particular style. And then I have the abstract, which is sort of like an explosion of colors, which is more, they're all inspired by different corners around the Formula One circuit. So I name each painting after a corner, and I kind of give a little quote, you know, to sort of, this is what inspired me to do this particular piece. And then I do this new style, which I've just started doing, is sort of pointillism, with a car in kind of in the picture, but it's kind of a little bit abstract. And I got in, actually, everybody's been telling me you got to paint cars, you know, because but I felt like, you know, it's a little bit too close to home to spend my whole life racing cars. And then I don't necessarily want to spend the rest of my life painting cars, you know, so. So I figured, but then I got the idea when I picked up a book about Surat, and Pizarro, you know, the pointillism from the Impressionist period. And I thought, well, maybe if I incorporate this somehow in the painting, it could be kind of a cool image, you know. So that's the latest style that I'm working on now.
That sounds really, really interesting. And
Yeah.
for sure will try to dig some more into it afterwards and try to get some more of your art, because it sounds really interesting, and especially the taking one corner of each circuit and
Yeah.
basically.
It's all on my website. All the different images and everything is on there already. So
Okay, then I will have a look afterwards. And all in all, from driving an F1 car to drawing, it's still art. It's just a different kind of art.
it's true, actually. It is very much so. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, it's driving a race car is a creative process in a different way, but you know, you have to always think about, you know, it's monotonous, but it's never monotonous. You know, it's the same corner, but the same corner is never the same corner. You always have to improvise. You always have to think about so many different things. And, you know, you think creatively as well, you know, whilst you're driving, because sometimes you have to, you know, to figure out the best situation during the course of a race with tire wear, fuel consumption. You know, you're fighting with some guy in front of you, another one behind you. You have your tire wear. I mean, all these different variables that comes into the equation the whole time.
Talking of monotonous life and what you spend your time with, you also now you have become a manager as well. Now you're managing some really successful drivers, actually, like Dixon Ross, Chris Grosjean, and so on and so forth. First question is, how did you come to become a manager? Was it something you always wanted to do, or did you just come across it and you liked it? And all in all, how do you like the managerial aspect?
Well, it's never something I really set out to do, for sure. It was more just sort of happened. You know, Scott I've been working with for over 20 years now, you know, 25 years almost. You know, he came when I had an Indy Lights team back in the 90s. He came from New Zealand, a 17-year-old, you know, trying to make a career over in America. And we, so I mean, I could see right away that he had extremely good talent, you know, and personality and everything. So we signed him, and then we basically been working together ever since.
Over the time when you were a pilot and a driver, and now where you are managing drivers, have you seen an evolution in contract discussions and negotiations? And have you seen or noticed any difference between contracts back then and now? And or in how far, in what sense are contracts different now to what they used to be in the time?
Not really. I think it's pretty much the same. I mean, each contract is different from the other. You know, it just depends on what the deal is. But you know, the way the contracts are written are quite similar now to how they were when I was driving, even. You know, so I don't. The only problem is from the point of view of, let's say, my contract back in the day. If you compare to a Formula One contract today, there's probably 2 zeros more or 3 at the end of the term, but otherwise it's all the same.
Managing different pilots as a Swedish man in the US, how is your relationship to other Swedish drivers right now, or even to pilots you do not manage? I think about Marcus Ericsson, which is really famous and quite successful right now over in the US. How is your relationship to Swedish pilots right now, or to Swedish?
Oh, it's very, very good. I mean, the Swedish guys, we've always got along great, you know, even though we're fighting against each other, and we've always, I think there's never been any real animosity between any of us, you know. In the period when I came through the ranks, you know, there was many really good Formula 3 drivers in Sweden. You know, and we all fought against each other, but in the evening we had dinner together, you know, and laughed and joked a little bit, and then we were racing hard again the next day, you know. So it's always been like that. And I mean, it's the same now, you know. Marcus is managed by a guy called Eje Elg. He's one one of my very, very best friends in my life. You know, we raced go-kart against each other when we were 12 years old, and we've been best friends ever since. You know, we lived together in Japan, raced Formula 2 over there in the 80s. I mean, and A is a great guy, you know, and we have a still very, very good relationship. And Marcus is a great guy, and Marcus and Felix, for example, are really good buddies, you know, although they're racing against each other in IndyCar, of course, but you know, and privately they're all really good friends, you know.
You mentioned racing against other Swedish drivers. You mentioned the very competitive landscape in motorsports in Sweden. Generally, how do you explain that there are so many Swedish or in general people from the north so into motorsport, and how can you explain that they have become so successful, big in F1, WRC, WEC, IndyCar? How because you don't think as the northern part of Europe maybe as a motorsport core or hard like England or Italy, and nevertheless, if you look at the success you achieved, it's astonishing. How do you explain that the northern part has become such an important factor for the motorsport culture?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, well, Sweden, I mean, we've had, you know, Formula One, it's been difficult for us, but the Finns are amazing. I mean, they keep knocking out great F1 drivers one after the other. And I mean, we've had a good rate of success, of course, in Sweden too, you know, with drivers across the board. And I don't know, I mean, maybe the mentality has some to do with it. You know, we're fairly sort of calm and calculating, sort of as opposed to the Latin temperament, maybe, you know, which is a little bit more explosive at times, and sometimes it helps, but most of the time I don't think it does, you know, so maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but it's, you know, I never want to generalize people in general nationalities or you know, people of whatever, you know, whatever ethnic background they have. I think every person is a unique individual, you know, and they all have different goals in life and different ambitions, you know, and some people have more discipline to reach their goals than others, you know, and I think at the end of the day, it's really down to the individual, how hard they work and how much they want it, you know, to be successful.
There was something quite funny you said about the Latin temperament, which I would like to ask you about. You said you are maybe more calm, more calculating, and still you drove for Ferrari, which is probably the more Latin and the most temperamentful racing team in the world. So
yeah,
how was it for you back then driving for Ferrari? How was you? I think you were able to meet Enzo Ferrari at the time. I think he was still living.
yeah, met all the time. We met almost every day when we were testing at Fiorano. We used to have lunch together every day when we were, you know, and we did a lot of testing back then, you know. We didn't have simulators or any of that stuff, you know, so everything you learned about a car, you had to learn driving on the track, you know, testing. So yeah, I mean, we spent numerous hours and days together, and it was wonderful, you know. I mean, we had great times and great conversations about everything under the sun, you know, aside from racing, of course. So it was a very precious moment really in my life, and more now when you reflect back on it, you realize how amazing that was. You know, you didn't think about it so much at the time, you know, because you were busy running around doing your business, you know, but yeah, it was pretty special.
How do you reflect on your time at Ferrari? I read in Nigel Mansell's biography, sorry, that he said once you're a Ferrari driver, you're always a Ferrari driver, and there's just something about it that's incomparable to everything else. So how do you reflect on your time at Ferrari?
I agree. I mean, it's 100% like that. It's an extraordinary, unique dynamic around this team, or the whole culture around the team and everything. And it's really true, you know. I mean, it's once you're part of the family, it never goes away, you know. I mean, it's more than 30 years ago now since I drove there, you know, and it's still the same, and still in contact with a lot of people there, you know, and everywhere you go in the world, you know, if you're a Ferrari driver, it's like being an astronaut almost, you know. It's like it's instant sort of recognition or respect or whatever, you know. So it's an amazing and extraordinary experience, really.
And I think even for you, having been able to know the late Enzo Ferrari, being one of the drivers he picked out, I think that must feel great as well. Like,
Yeah, that's extra special, of course, that, you know, he was the one who chose me to drive for his team. Of course, it's you know, again, it's because even to this day, it's the dream of every driver is to drive the red cars, you know. I mean, there's just no question about it, you know. That's like the ultimate accolade for any driver, I think, to be picked by Ferrari to drive for them.
I'm already quite happy to achieve a dream and talking to former Ferrari drivers. So again, thanks for that. Speaking about Ferrari and motorsport, has your relationship with motorsport evolved in any kind or any way since you finished your almost finished your career? You're still more or less active, but have you changed your mind about it, or are you still as involved or as in love with it?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I'm still quite heavily involved, obviously, on the management side, you know, and I still work consulting here and there, you know, for with different teams and so on. So yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting to follow the evolution of primarily the technology really is what's evolved, and you know, and it's become so advanced and so sophisticated now, the technology on every level, really. Not aerodynamics, of course, is always the driving factor, you know, that's what gives you the most performance, but on every level, really, the engine technology is extraordinary now, how good these engines are. Electronics is obviously, you know, a huge part of the whole equation as well. So all of these things, you know, it's just the only problem, well, one of the problems I should say with that is that, of course, it affects the racing on all down to grassroots level almost, because you can't just hide the technology and put it in a can somewhere and pretend it doesn't exist. So it affects cars even down to the lowest level. And that means that the cost of running these cars is now massively higher than it used to be. Because, you know, both in terms of how many people you need to run the car to operate all the different, you know, the electronics needs at least 1 or 2 people alone, and then all the other stuff, you know. So the budgets for even the barrier of entry for anyone who wants to get into racing now is significantly higher than it used to be, you know, to show how good you are, and at least then maybe get the opportunity as a driver to raise the interest from a team, you know, that will take you on and help you along the way, you know. So it's I think now it's got to the point where a lot of really great drivers just fall by the wayside before they even get a chance to show how good they are, because of the high cost of performing, you know, or just being there and race, basically.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue to tackle, and I agree on 100% with you, and you know even much more so. There was one last question I would like to ask, in generally speaking, and before moving to the Formula One front. You mentioned the technology, so obviously today F1, WEC, Indy cars are quite different just because of all the aerodynamics and so on and so forth. But back in the day, when you were able to switch from Formula One to Indy and do some endurance racing at the time, were the car already so different, or as different as they tend to be now, or were they kind of similar, or was it easy to switch from one car to another?
It's never easy, because, you know, it's easy to get to 95% performance, you know, but the last 5 is always tricky. And that's, I always say, you know, to be really ultimately successful, you have to become a specialist in every category. You know, the days are over where you could just jump in and out of different cars and immediately be on the pace, because you can see the F1 guys coming over here, they're struggling, you know, to win races in IndyCar. And of course, it's absolutely the same way going to more so to Formula One, I think, because of there's just so much you need to learn about the settings of the car and the steering wheel and all the stuff you can adjust all the time. So you know, and then you have different racecraft, you know, different. So it's always a difficult adjustment to jump from one category to another for sure. And the same thing with sports cars, you know. But sports cars is great in general, I would say, because you get a lot of seat time and you have to improvise a lot because of the difference between the speed of the cars. The track is never the same, you know, let's say Le Mans 24 hours, you know, the same corner is never the same corner because the one lap is like this, the next lap someone's been in the gravel and that is full of gravel and stuff, you know, at the line you took the lap before. So you always have to improvise and be, you know, different lines, but you always have to drive on the limit. So it's a really good training for drivers to do sports car racing in addition or in preparation for whatever else they do. So
you mentioned Le Mans, and obviously you have been quite successful in Le Mans, no doubt about that.
yeah.
Would you say that winning Le Mans was the pinnacle of your career, your the best moment so far, or the best moment of your career, or would you say that, or how would you reflect on winning Le Mans, which is?
No, I mean, Le Mans, of course, is, you know, every driver wants to, there's the three races everybody wants to, it's the Monaco Grand Prix, Le Mans, and the Indy 500. And I don't know if you want to quantify one or the other. Of course, it's always great when you win, you know, but you win or you finish 10th, you know, your own effort you may do a much better job if you're honest with yourself in a race where you finish 10th in a car that maybe wasn't the best car on the day, you know, and when all the stars doesn't line up perfect, you know. But if you're in a good car and everything works well, you know, and the stars line up perfect all the way, you win the race. I mean, that's unless you screw it up yourself, of course, you know. But there's been times, you know, so I mean, of course, it's the pinnacle of my let's say results or success, you know, in that way. But obviously being hired by Ferrari, I think is very much up there, you know, and I should have won a number of races with Ferrari if things would have gone the right way, you know, with mechanical failures. Sometimes it was team orders, this, that, and the other, you know, but it's easy. Actually, it's difficult to reflect on afterwards, but you know, it is what it is. So
You had 12 podiums, which is it's astonishing. It's yeah, you had a really successful career, but that one win was always the one that got away. So
yeah,
how difficult is it to get that first win? Because if we think about it right now, Carlos Sainz won his first race and he was up there for 1, 2, 3 years, and now he won it. But how complicated is it to just make it happen? And does this change really that much in the state of mind, the approach and everything afterwards?
I think it does, you know, and I mean, it does in your own head, of course. It definitely does change your, I think, just level of confidence and knowing that you can win, you know. But I think it also changes the dynamic inside the team, which may be more important. You know, if I'd won that race at Imola with Ferrari, for example, which was only my second race with the team, I think it would have been a totally different dynamic, you know, and it would have given me the strength, you know, to push a lot harder for my territory, let's say. I was maybe a little bit too grateful for the opportunity at the time, you know, and I figured, there'll be another one, you know, there'll be another chance. And then, you know, before you know it, you know, then there aren't. So I think that's one of the things, you know, that it's tough to get into that. I mean, the hardest part of Formula One is to get in a car that can win races and then, you know, be with a team that can, you know, consistently be in that level. Because throughout history in F1, there's really never been, some years there's maybe 3 teams that can win, but most of the time there's only 2. And a lot of the times there's only 1 that just win everything, basically, like we've had with Mercedes for almost 10 years now, you know. So now they're getting competition, but you know, you knew it was going to be one of the 2, unless they have a mechanical failure that was going to win the race almost, you know. So the hard part of the job is really to get into that situation and make the right choice to, you know, pick the right team at the right time. And, you know, like Lewis, everybody thought he was crazy when he went from McLaren to Mercedes, and, you know, McLaren just spiraled after he left, basically. So I think, you know, that's really a huge part of the job is picking the right team at the right time.
And yeah, you mentioned your time in Formula One. Obviously, that was a really different time in the 80s. One thing that I would like to ask you about, because you were active roughly from 81 to the 90s, although in 82 you did not have a seat. Just about the driver's strike of 1892, because you drove a bit before and afterwards in 83 you got a seat. Did you feel like there was a difference? There was a before and then after 1982 and the driver's strike, or not?
I wasn't there before the driver's strike, so but I don't think so. I mean, I think that was just part of the politics at the time. I don't think anyone really, they just got on with the job again, and did what they had to do.
And generally speaking, if you would compare to today's F1 cars to the 80s, because you also had some kind of ground effect. Yeah, how would you compare them? Personally, when was the last time you drove an F1 car, and would you like to drive?
I haven't driven any of the current cars, actually, so I can't judge, but you can sort of just look and see the difference. Obviously, I still think that the ultimate era of Formula One was probably the sort of last years of the turbo era, like 85 and 86. 85, we had no limit on the boost, so you literally in qualifying, whatever you got, that's what you had. You couldn't even measure it on the dynos, the amount of horsepower, but it was, in qualifying we had at least 1500 horsepower sometimes, and it was and the car only weighed 500 kilos then, and really no aerodynamics at all, to speak of. So it was just tire grip, mechanical grip, and a little bit of aero, and just 1500 of, like a grenade basically that went off every time you touched the throttle, but it was unbelievably exciting cars to drive. Of course, you were just holding on for dear life, and wheels, I mean, with qualifying tires that can only do one lap, we had wheel spin going from 5th to 6th, even at Monza, which is, super long straights and really long gears. So it was they were just crazy cars, but from a driver's point of view, it was like the ultimate experience, I think, to drive these things.
So when was the last time you actually drove an F1 car then? Since wondering.
Well, I drove. Let me see now. I mean, now it's a while ago. It's probably maybe 10 years ago. I drove, but the car didn't really run very well. It was actually Michael Schumacher's Benetton. I drove it, owned by Zach Brown. I drove it at Mont-Tremblant in Canada. It was just like a vintage event there. And then I drove Ronnie Peterson's March in Anderstorp in Sweden I think that was in 2008, which was interesting because that was the 70s car with a Cosworth DFE. They had about 450 horsepower, and it felt like a little toy compared to the cars from the 80s, with so much horsepower and stuff. Very gentle, no error at all. So the car was very slow in reacting. You can drive it with a little slide all the time. It's very, very comfortable. It's a lot of fun to drive.
Yeah, all in all, in the 80s, I think they like building some monsters, be it the F1 cars or the Group B cars in the rally, which was kind of
it was like, it was crazy. The whole era was crazy.
You mentioned some of the drivers. I think you drove against legends of the sport, being Mansell, Senna, Prost, which was your teammate as well. Gay, Lauda, Arnoux. How do you reflect on the time? There are so many illustrious pilots, so many legendary drivers. It's what dreams are made of. So how do you reflect on that time? And
I mean, it was incredible. Of course, when you're in it, you don't look at it in the same way. But I think the first year I came into Formula One properly, there was 10 world champions still racing. So it was I mean, you had some serious guys racing against, but I mean, the thing is when you're in the middle of it like that, I mean, you have to think that way, because to be successful, you have to think you're the best in the world, so you kind of just, Nicky Lauda, he's old, I beat him, he's, and that's kind of the mindset you have to have, so it was, but it was great. I mean, it kind of, if nothing else, it'll certainly reaffirmed, the belief you had to have in yourself when you beat those guys. You obviously knew that you've beaten the best guys in the world, so it was a good feeling for sure.
And just, I have one question about Alain Prost, because I do not have this often the opportunity to talk to someone who used to be his teammate. In today's world, you always have the story about Prost against Senna. Senna, the fiery temperament, Prost, the cold, calculating pilot. How was he like in reality when he was your teammate? Was he that cold, that calculating, or the story that I told today, do they tend to put them in the wrong light?
No, I mean, I have, nothing but respect for Alain. I think he's actually highly underrated in the bigger picture by most people. I think in that era, he was the best driver as the complete package. Ayrton absolutely was the fastest guy, he may have been the fastest guy ever, but I think he lacked in a lot of areas that ultimately prevented him from being should be the most successful driver in history, maybe, because Alain had the ability to always look at the bigger picture and plan not only the race, but his whole career that way, because when he went to Williams, for example, he saw, and comes back to what I was talking about earlier on, that, part of the job as a driver is to pick the right team at the right time. And he obviously saw what Williams was doing. He knew that was going to be the car to be in to win the championship the following year. He did a deal with them very early on, and he put a clause in which would veto Ayrton to join the team as well, or any other driver, basically. So he snookered him, basically, and then when Ayrton then realized that McLaren's not going to get the job done, it was too late. So he was stuck there. And Alain cruised home and won the championship, his fourth championship, so, but not only that, but I mean, from just how you manage the whole weekend and everything. I mean, I learned more in 1 year from Alain than I did in my whole career, probably. I mean, just how you work with the setup of the car, how you manage all the people around you. He's the boss of his car, and all the people around he just placed them like like a violin, and that's what you have to do, because it's, you're the kind of the center forward or the quarterback of the team, and you have to push everybody else to get the job done on your car, to be able to win. So it was a very enlightening, and kind of, it took me 3 or 4 races it was just like, whoa, it was just so much information. But once you break it down and you see how he works, it was unbelievably educational for me, And aside from that, he was a great guy. I mean, we had a lot of fun together, and just as people, as human beings and friends, after we finish the debriefs and everything, we go for dinner, and it's, just a nice, really nice ambience in the team,
To follow up on what you say, you mentioned the race preparation and what Alain, in how far he helped you, or just in the procedure. Did you have some rituals before the race, or how did you prepare for a race?
Well, I mean, when I say prepare for a race, in this case, it wasn't so much, it was just generally how you operate on a weekend, the whole car, how you go through the set. Because remember, back then we had no computers. There was no data collected on the car at all, nothing. We had 0 data on the car, so it was really what the driver told the engineer that's the only data you had. So you had to 100% rely on what the driver was telling you, and of course that made it crucial, you know, that you gave the team the right data, and so it was more that, you know, than anything else. Then I think every driver have their own ritual before you get in the car. You know, I was always quite superstitious, and I think a lot of drivers are. You know, you have to always get in the car from the left side, tie the shoes the left side first, you know, the left shoe first. And I had one pair of lucky underwear that I wore my whole career. It was just shreds hanging off the elastic in the end, you know, but lots of stupid stuff, you know, like, but I think a lot of sportsmen have sort of these superstitious things they deal with, you know, the sort of the pre-game ritual, whatever. Yeah.
But it's always interesting just to know how people tend to prepare and different, just differently. Finishing your career in Formula One, you drove for Monitor, which for us in Belgium is kind of interesting because got to meet Van Rossem, which was a.
Well, you know, also with you know, I have a strong connection to Belgium because my daughter is Belgian. Her mom is from Antwerp, so I actually lived in Antwerp for a few years during that period also.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that. And I think Van Rossem also came from Antwerp.
Yeah, his office was in Antwerp also. Yeah. I remember I spent numerous days in his office during that period. Yeah, he was a very interesting character for sure.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about. How do you reflect on your time at Monitron, and what do you think of Monitron as a team, and just about Van Rossem, because you get to read so much about him, but just being able to,
No, you know what? It was a really great experience overall because the team was a super small team. It was really a bunch of guys that worked together in the past, you know, friends that got together and started this team. You know, I was just hired as the driver, but I knew everybody very well. You know, I knew Mike Earl really well from Formula 2 days, and Alan Jenkins I knew really well from back in the McLaren days, you know, although we never worked at McLaren, but we were very close friends from before. Lots of the other guys, mechanics, everybody. So it was really a bunch of buddies that got together and tried to do this thing. And the car was amazing. I mean, you know, and, you know, with this small team with almost no resources, we finished top 10 in the World Championship the first year, and with 12 cars that had to pre-qualify every race, which was extraordinary. We finished on the podium one time, you know, and I mean, even Toyota, Honda, all the big car manufacturers wasn't able to do that in their first year. So I think it was very impressive what we accomplished in that year, you know, definitely. And Van Rossem was, you know, came in a little bit late, you know, after the season had already started. And without him, the team would have folded before the season even finished. So, you know, and everybody sort of talk a lot about this guy, you know, but I liked him a lot. And we had some really good moments together. You know, he was very funny, had a great sense of humor, and he did everything he promised he would do. And in fact, more than that in the end, you know, so he was, it took a little while sometimes, you know, but he paid all the bills, he paid everything, you know, as he was promised to do, you know. So for me, it was, you know, it was just a shame we couldn't carry on, because I think that the trajectory we had and everything, if we'd had the funding for the second year and then carrying on, we would have been, it could have been a really, really great team, you know.
Yeah, for sure. It's also interesting from the outside, and just being able to achieve such great results. I think you were third, right? The podium you did was third.
Yeah, Portugal. Yeah.
And just one more question about Belgium. I think we mentioned Le Mans. Obviously, in Belgium, there was one really successful driver who also won Le Mans and drove for Ferrari, which is Jacky Ickx. And at the time, we were also able in Formula 1 to compete against Thierry Boutsen. How do you reflect on both of them? Any particular relationship or anything?
Yeah, Thierry and I had a great relationship because we were teammates at Spirit. And we'd raced against each other in Formula 2 before and so on. And then obviously in Formula 1. And I see Thierry from time to time when I go to Monaco, you know, we're still very good friends, you know, and And you know, he was extremely good driver in his period, of course. You know, we fought hard and fair many times, you know, but he's a great guy. I really enjoy him as a friend. You know, we don't see each other so much anymore, but you don't have to, you know, with all these guys, you know, there's a kind of a bond between all of us that when we meet, it's like it was yesterday. You catch up from 10 years past between we meet, but it's like it was yesterday, you know, we straight into wherever we've finished off, you know. So yeah, it's great. And Jacky, of course, is you know, I mean, he's a legend. I mean, you know, in every aspect of his career, you know, he's just been such a great racer, but also a great ambassador for many different companies and stuff, you know. And I saw Jacky earlier on in the year, you know, we both received the Hall of Fame award at Sebring early in the year. So I saw Jacky down there, and yeah, he's on good form, you know, and still very active. It's great. It's good to see.
Yeah, I think for the most of the Formula One part, that was it. I would just finish by asking you, do you think it's easier to be an F1 fan today than it was 20 or 30 years ago?
To be an F1 fan?
Yeah.
Well, it is, because you have a lot more access to Formula One today than you did back then, of course. You know, there's so many more outlets now and media where you almost get information overload if you really want to, you know. So, I mean, back then, you know, national television was really the only form of information you could get, you know, when the race was on Sunday, and then the sort of specialist magazine or whatever, you know. But now you got social media, you got Twitter, you got Instagram, you got Facebook, you got all these TV shows coming through now. So there's obviously I mean, Formula One is really taking off now, which is great to see, you know, and for the most part, I think that's a very positive thing, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the main difference is today it's easier to get to get some Formula One, and back in the days it was more complicated. But once you were into it, and once you began liking it, it was even more gratifying to understand everything around it. So, but yeah, I get your point. I would just like to finish by asking you a quick Q&A, which are some rapid questions, just straightforward, and just having your take on it.
Yeah.
So, what is your favorite ability someone can possess? Do you think you prefer by someone?
Ability, integrity, I suppose.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that's also what you like most, what your friend should be like, with just truth.
Yeah.
Your dream of happiness, what is or should happiness be for you?
To wake up every day healthy and do what I love doing.
Your main flaw?
Very low level of patience.
Your favorite occupation or hobby, but I think that's painting, probably.
My work and my hobby has been the same since I was a kid, really. I've had a real job for 6 months when I was 18. I worked in a factory in Sweden for 6, but otherwise I've done what I love doing my whole life, and I've managed to somehow make it work, you know. But
if you were not able to be a painter, if you hadn't managed to become a Formula One driver, what would you like to be, or what would you like to have been doing for a living?
It would have been something creative. I think maybe I was quite interested in architecture. I think I probably would have studied and I would have become an architect.
Your favorite heroes or heroines in fiction?
My favorite what, sorry?
Heroes, or your idols in fiction.
In fiction, oh my. I don't know if I have any really.
And in real life, your idols, your people who inspired you, or whatever in real life.
I guess the one big inspiration is Leonardo da Vinci. He was a bit of a jack of all trades, kind of like, like I don't try to be, but it's just the way it's going. You know, I just, if something interests me, I kind of dig deep, you know, and just jump into it. But he was extraordinary, you know, in his vast knowledge of so many different things.
And was he also your favorite artist or painter, or would that be someone else?
I do have, well, Goya was one of my favorites. I guess, yeah. And then there's another one, a contemporary artist that very few people know about, strangely. His name is Mark Tansey, Tansey. He's a figurative painter. His paintings sell for millions and millions, but hardly anyone knows of him. But his work goes for huge money, but he's extraordinary. I mean, I've been trying to understand his technique for years, how he does it, but it's amazing. It's really, really cool stuff. Should look it up.
That's some great promoting you did there, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I will. What do you hate the most?
Small talk.
Okay.
Chit chat.
So to the point.
Yeah.
And one natural ability you would like to possess? More patience.
Yeah, definitely. That would be one of them. Yeah. Yeah.
And to finish off with, your current state of mind, and do you have any slogan, any motto, any guiding words?
Just do the right thing. That's probably, you know, everybody knows the problem today is, I think, you know, there's so many this, that, and the other, but in your gut, you know, when you do the right thing or not. You don't have to rationalize everything, you know. So just what I try to do all the time. Just do the right thing, and, you know, and be a good person. You know, that's really what it comes down to for me. Yeah.
So a bit like follow your instincts and already.
Yeah, and the instinct tells you, then you start modifying that, and you know, and then you get impressions from all sorts of sources, you know. But I think within yourself, in your stomach, you know when you do the right thing or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
From my side, that will, yeah. I'm sorry if it was a bit blurry or jumping from.
No, it was good. Well, I enjoyed this.
There were so many questions I would like to ask you, because you have such an interesting profile, career, the managing, the painting, the sports, everything, and I could talk the whole day to you. So again, I would like to really thank you for the past hour, because it was
no problem. Anytime you want to do it again, you know, just let me know. We'll do another one if you want.
That's good to know. And Kevin. Kevin did not manage to be here today, but he wanted to let you know that.
Okay.
You.
Send him my best. Yeah.
And yeah, just thanks for the interview, and it was really nice. And if you're in Belgium at one point, don't hesitate contacting us, and would be with great honor that we'll meet up. And
definitely, yeah, I would like that.
Belgian beer.
Yeah, exactly. Good.
But thanks for everything, and I wish you a very nice day. I think it's quite early still in Santa
Monica. Yeah, it's only 10 in the morning here.
Okay,
my day's just starting.
So have a really nice day.
I'm going to start doing some painting now.
Okay, then I wish you a really nice day, and
thank you.
Hopefully we'll be able to see each other again at one point.
I hope so, definitely.
Bye, and thanks.
Take care. We'll speak soon.